you, New Hampshire Democrats. It is so great to be here with all of you and in the state that had the audacity to send not one but two women to the United States Senate in Maggie Hassan and Jean Shaheen. Thank you so much. You know, New Hampshire, I started my campaign in the middle of a Minnesota blizzard. And there were 4 inches of snow on my head because I wanted to impress New Hampshire. And a lot of people predicted I wouldn't even make it through that speech. But I made it through that speech. And I made it through the summer. And I made it to that debate stage last night. And we have momentum like never before. We have beaten the odds every step of the way. Because we know in our hearts, and I'm speaking to all of the supporters there for all of the candidates right now, we know that what unites us is bigger than what divides us. We know that as a party. We know that. And we know that, yes, this election is an economic check on this president because people are not sharing in the prosperity across this nation. But we also know that this election is a patriotism check. It is a decency check on this president. And what unites us more than anything is that we know that the heart of America is bigger than the heart of the guy in the White House. We know that. Every one of us knows that. And Donald Trump's nightmare is that our fired up Democrats will march to victory with independents of New Hampshire, right? With people from all over this state, and that we will win big in November. That is his nightmare. So, what will I do? I will pass a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. We will get that done to get the big money out of our politics. What unites us is to stop his shameful attempts to repeal the Affordable Care Act and kick people off of their health insurance for pre-existing conditions. That is wrong, and we will stop him. We will take on Big Pharma to bring down the cost of prescription drugs. We will take on the NRA to pass gun safety legislation. That is our optimistic agenda for this country. Because we know, as a party, that we are not going to be able to divide the divider-in-chief. We're not going to be able to out-divide him. No, we're not going to be out-dividing someone that actually wakes up every morning and sees who he can take on next, see who he can blame next. Let's see what the list is. He blames Barack Obama, right? He does that all the time. He blames immigrants. He blames the head of the Federal Reserve that he appointed. He blames the generals that he commanded. He blames the entire kingdom of Denmark. Who does that? He even blamed the Prime Minister of Canada for cutting him out of the Canadian version of Home Alone 2. He does that. He blames people. And what do we have to offer instead? We are a party that brings people with us instead of shutting them out. And you know that is something that I have done. I have won in the rural areas, big time. I have won in the suburban areas. I have won every single election I've ever run back to 4th grade. Now, Democrats, we have to remember that when we bring people with us, that we put someone on the ticket that gets it, that can bring those people back. And you know my background. I am the granddaughter. Exactly. Hi, Bernie people. I am the granddaughter of an iron ore miner. I am the daughter of a teacher and a newspaper man. I am the first woman elected to the United States Senate from the state of Minnesota, and I am a candidate for President of the United States. And that is because we live in a country of shared dreams, that no matter where you come from or who you know or where you worship or who you love, that you can make it in the United States of America. I will end with this. I told this story last night as I was spending a lot of time during that impeachment trial thinking. We all spent a lot of time thinking. And I thought of the fact that we got a president that literally thinks he can bulldoze over our democracy, that he can rise above the rule of law, that it doesn't matter to him, that he can decide who gets the American dream. And I thought of that story of FDR. And when he died, they put his body on a train, and people stood spontaneously by the train track to show their respect. And there's a guy standing there, regular guy, sobbing with the hat in his hands. And this reporter says to him, "Sir, did you know the president?" And the guy says, "No, I didn't know the president, but the president knew me." What is missing, Democrats of New Hampshire, with this guy is empathy. What is missing is a sacred trust between this president and the people. And I will tell you this, if you are having trouble deciding you fill your refrigerator or your prescription, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you can't decide between long-term care for your parents or child care for your kids, I know you, and I will fight for you. If you can't decide if you're going to be able to stretch your paycheck to pay the rent, I know you, and I will fight for you. That is how we win this election. Democrats, that is how we win. So I'm asking you to join our fight. I don't have the biggest bank account, if you didn't notice. I'm not the tallest person in the room. But what I've got is grit. The grit you get from a Minnesota blizzard. The grit you get from spending your life, not an easy life, fighting and overcoming adversity. The grit you get when you don't have that perfect birth, when your daughter's born and you get kicked out of the hospital while she's in intensive care, and your first political moment is your life is to pass one of the first bills in the country guaranteeing new moms and their babies a 48-hour hospital stay. That is grit. That is grit. And that is what I bring to this ticket. I picked the color green because it is the color of my political mentor, Paul Wellstone. He brought people with him. I am asking you to come with us. Let's go. Vote. I ask for your vote. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you. Thank you, Senator Shaheen. It's not often you get to speak after someone so respected they named the event after her. Thanks for all the work you and the delegation are doing, Senator Hassan, Congressman Pappas, and my good friend whose support I am so thankful to have, Congresswoman Annie Kuster. Thank you. And thank you, New Hampshire, for welcoming us to this state over the course of the last year. I am here one more time to ask you to join me, not only to end the era of Donald Trump, but to launch the era that must come next. Now, I know some are asking, what business does the South Bend mayor have seeking the highest office in the land? You don't have an office in Washington. You don't have decades of experience in the establishment. The city you're the mayor of isn't even the biggest city in the country. It's more like Manchester, New Hampshire. To which I say that is very much the point. Because Americans in small rural towns, in industrial communities, and yes, in pockets of our country's biggest cities, are tired of being reduced to a punchline by Washington politicians and ready for somebody to take their voice to the American Capitol. And that is how we are going to defeat Donald Trump. How would you like to see a president who cuts taxes for giant corporations have to compete against someone who actually lives in a middle-class neighborhood in the American Midwest and is ready to call him out? How would you like to see a president who likes to cloak himself in religion, this president, have to stand next to someone not afraid to remind fellow believers that God does not belong to a political party in this country? How would you like to see a president who avoided serving when it was his turn have to square off against a war veteran prepared to illustrate why there is nothing patriotic about pardoning war criminals while punishing war heroes? We will beat this president. With a president this disruptive, we cannot run the risk of trying to defeat a fundamentally new challenge by relying on the familiar playbook from before. With a president this divisive, we cannot risk dividing Americans' future further, saying that you must either be for a revolution or you must be for the status quo. Let's make room for everybody in this movement. This is our one shot, our one chance to defeat Donald Trump. And there's an American majority that is unified not just in who we are against, but in what we are for. Because we are for higher wages and the empowerment of workers. We are for honoring our troops by putting an end to endless war. We are for our teachers and prepared to back them up with a Secretary of Education who believes in public education. We are for creating an American experience where your race has no bearing on your health or your wealth or your experience with law enforcement. That is the America we must build together. And we cannot wait any longer. The 10-year-old who asked me what we're going to do so his family can afford insulin cannot wait for us to act to ensure there is no such thing as an uninsured American and no such thing as an unaffordable prescription. The 13-year-old who told me that she asked for a Kevlar backpack for Christmas cannot wait for us to act to protect her school from gun violence. We must act now. I am asking for your support because I believe that the purpose of the presidency is not the glorification of the president. It is the empowerment and the unification of the American people to tackle these big challenges. And my belief in this America is not the product of my age. It's the product of my experience. If you believe in an American future defined by belonging, this is our chance. If you believe in an American politics defined by boldness, this is our chance. If you believe in an American future defined by unity, this is our chance, New Hampshire. New Hampshire, on Tuesday, let's make history and let's go on to defeat Donald Trump in November. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Appreciate it. Hello, New Hampshire. It's great to be here with you tonight. One reason is you know how to run elections. You know how to run primaries. You have an incredible delegation in Jeannie Shaheen and Maggie Hassan and Chris Pappas and Annie Custer. We'll give them a big round of applause. They're one of the best in the country. Folks, I think you all know what's at stake in this election. We all agree on it. We all know that we cannot sustain 4 more years of President Trump as President of the United States of America. We know, the people of New Hampshire know better. Nobody takes your responsibility more serious than you do up here in New Hampshire. You think for yourself. You know our party, and you know your neighbors. I've said many times, America's character is literally on the ballot. You know, we have to act. You know, the man I met in Claremont about, I don't know how many days ago, pulled me aside and said, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I'm losing my job. I don't know how to tell my family. What do I say? What do I do? How do I do it? It was an incredibly emotional situation. And I said, look, I understand. I told him about my dad when he had to make what I call the longest walk up a short flight of stairs to the kid's bedroom to say, Joey, I don't have a job. We got to move. We can't live here anymore. We got to move. And he said, but everything's going to be okay. And he meant it. It took him 3 years moving to Delaware to be able to get us a house to live in, but he was confident to be okay. But how many people today are able to look their children in the eye, faced with that kind of crisis, and say, it's going to be okay? They don't think it's going to be okay because we made it so much harder in this country under this president to, quote, make it okay. Or not long ago, matter of fact, just a couple hours ago, about 10, 12 hours ago, Jill and I and our grandchildren stood in line in Manchester for food for children. Bitterly cold, 22 degrees, the wind blowing. And you see all these little children. You see them standing in line, huddled, no gloves, freezing to death, waiting to pick up a cardboard box, not able to pick it up, kicking it along the way so they could put bread in it. They could put donuts in it. They could put things that they were able to get for food. In the United States of America, watching a woman with barely a sweater on, holding her child tightly, and you could see the tears coming down her eyes as she picked up bread. What kind of bread? The men who came along, unable to lift their heads up and look, just thinking, my God, I thought to myself, this is the United States of America. How can that be happening in the United States of America? Hundreds and hundreds of people in that bitter cold with nothing to look forward to in their minds, just to get a little sustenance. You know, one of the guys walked up and it was so cold, gave me a skull cap. And I thought to myself, why do I have this skull cap? I gave it to one of the kids. Think about it. New Hampshire, the United States of America, a line that lasted and lasted and lasted and lasted with no hope in sight for these people. This is not the America any of us grew up in, that we believe in. This is not who we are. Or the other day, actually it was about 3 days ago, what happened? I was being introduced in Claremont, I believe it was. And a woman, they said, there's a woman going to introduce you. And her name was Chrissy. And she looked at me and she said, I'm going to tell my story. She was a violence against women victim, battered and beaten by her husband. She said she walked out and she was on the street with a little baby, nowhere to go. Then she picked up a paper and she looked down and she said, I don't know this guy, but he's writing the Violence Against Women Act. He's going to find me a house, find me a home. Well, guess what? She said it saved her life, but she had a mental and physical abuse and the impact on her child. Well, at least he got her off the street. The vast majority of children on the street are there because their mothers are being abused and battered. How many of them are suffering from post-traumatic stress with us doing nothing about it? And the Violence Against Women Act I wrote is sitting in the United States Senate, not being passed today because they want to allow boyfriends who beat up their wives to own guns that kill their spouses. Folks, we got to change this. This is why we're all running, every one of us. This is what this is about. It's not about something else. It's not about the other way. And folks, we're being led by a president who absolutely has no empathy, no sympathy, who mocks people, who makes fun of people with disabilities, who does everything he can to demean. He doesn't have a shred of decency in him. He speaks to women like in such a degrading terms. That's not how we were raised. That's not how you were raised here in New Hampshire. That's not how I was raised. That's not the America any of us know. And it doesn't represent New Hampshire values either. You know, I've lost a lot in my lifetime like a lot of you have. I lost my wife and daughter in an automobile accident. I lost my son to a long bout with brain cancer when he came home from Iraq. But I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and lose this election to this man. We cannot let it happen. We cannot let it happen. The character of this country is on the ballot. We must defeat Donald Trump. There is no choice. The man has not a shred of decency. So we have to stand up against bigotry, hatred, We have to stand up against the abuse of power. This man derides people. It's time to heal America. And only we, the Democratic Party, can do it, and we must do it now. So stand up, take it back. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. Let's go do it now, now, now. Thank you all so much. Really, thanks, man. Thank you.
Hello, New Hampshire! It is phenomenal to be here with you tonight, and thank you, Yang Gang. I love campaigning here in New Hampshire for so many reasons, but one reason, I don't know how many of you knew this, I went to high school right here in the state. I graduated from Phillips Exeter Academy in 1992. And it's a thrill to be campaigning here tonight because you all are among the most powerful and influential people in our country today. I know it may not feel like it, but I did the math, New Hampshire. Do you know how many Californians each of you is worth? 1,000 Californians each. So look around this stadium tonight. How many of us are here together? I'm going to give a Trumpian estimate. There are 80,000 people here tonight. It's the biggest crowd anyone has ever seen. There are legitimately 7,000 people here tonight, which is like 7 million Californians in voting power. That's the power you all have to move our country forward and address a challenge, a problem that we have been struggling with for the last several years. And that problem, that challenge is this: why is Donald Trump our president? If you were to turn on cable news, you would think he's our president because of some combination of Russia, racism, Facebook, the FBI, the Electoral College, and on and on. But we know different. I'm a numbers guy in New Hampshire. I was well educated here. And the numbers tell a very clear and direct story as to why Donald Trump is our president today. He is our president because we eliminated 4 million manufacturing jobs in this country in Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Missouri, Iowa, and it happened here in New Hampshire earlier on. You all lost 12,000 manufacturing jobs in the northern part of the state. And when you go to those towns, after the mill closed, the shopping center closed, people left, the school shrank, and that town has never recovered. The same thing has happened in Missouri, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan. This is why Donald Trump is our president. And this is what we must solve for. We are making a mistake when we act like Donald Trump is the source of all of our problems, New Hampshire. He is not. He is a symptom of a disease that has been building up in our communities for years and decades. So the question is, how do we cure the disease? If you know anything about me and my campaign, you've heard that I'm running for president saying we should give every American $1,000 a month from age 18 until the day they die. And I know this seems like an awfully dramatic policy, but this is not my idea and it's not a new idea. Thomas Paine was for this at the founding of our country. Martin Luther King fought for it in the 60s. Milton Friedman and 1,000 economists endorsed it. It passed the U.S. House twice in '71. And one state actually has a dividend now where everyone in that state gets between $1,000 and $2,000 a year, no questions asked. And what state is that? And how do they pay for it? And what is the oil of the 21st century? Technology, data, AI, self-driving cars and trucks. A study just came out that said that our data, your data, is now worth more than oil. How many of you saw that study? How many of you got your data check in the mail last month? If you didn't get the data check, where did it go? Amazon, Facebook, Google, Apple, and the trillion-dollar tech companies that are paying nothing or next to nothing back into our country. This is what we must solve for, New Hampshire. We have record high corporate profits in this country right now. What else are at record highs? Suicides, drug overdose, substance abuse, stress, financial insecurity, student loan debt, medical bankruptcy, mental illness, depression. What are at record lows in the United States of America right now? Getting married, having a child, starting a business for a young person. We are following GDP and corporate profits off a cliff, New Hampshire. They're leading us the wrong direction. I know how off base our economic measurements are because of my own family. My wife is at home every day with our 2 boys, one of whom is autistic. How much is her work valued at in our market economy? Evelyn gets a 0, as does every other stay-at-home parent in our country. How about caregivers taking care of ailing loved ones? Also 0. How about volunteers and activists trying to make things better in our communities? How about coaches and mentors investing in our kids? How about most artists? And increasingly in New Hampshire, this is a problem you should care deeply about. How about local journalists? It is very, very hard to have a democracy function when people don't actually know what's going on in their community. These are the things we claim to value most in our lives: our children, our families, our community, our democracy, and they're getting zeroed out one by one by one. That is what we must reverse on Tuesday. We have to let our fellow Americans know that economic value and human value are not the same things, and that we each have intrinsic value as Americans, as people, and as owners and shareholders of the richest country in the history of the world. New Hampshire, I am not running for president because I dreamt about being president. Those were not the conversations in the Yang household. My parents were not like, "You're going to be president someday." They were more like, "You're terrible, go clean your room." I'm running for president because, like so many of you here tonight, I'm a parent and a patriot. I have seen the future that lies ahead for our kids, and it is not something I'm willing to accept for them. They deserve better, and we must give them better starting on Tuesday. New Hampshire, Donald Trump is our president today because he had a very simple, powerful, compelling message for our country. He said he was going to make America great again. What did Hillary Clinton say in response? America is already great. You remember that? That response did not work for many Americans because the problems in our communities are all too real. We have to acknowledge their depth and severity and reality, but then we need real solutions that will actually move our country forward. What were Donald Trump's solutions? Build a wall, turn the clock back, bring the old jobs back. New Hampshire, you know we have to do the opposite of these things. We have to turn the clock forward. We have to accelerate our economy and society to rise to the real challenges of the 21st century, like climate change. We have to evolve in the way we see ourselves and our work and our value. I am the ideal candidate for this job, New Hampshire, because the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Thank you all very much. Let's make America think harder and move this country forward on Tuesday. Let's give our kids a future we will actually be proud to leave to them. Thank you, New Hampshire. I love you.